Everyone had seen stories where someone transmigrated as the game's main character and steamrolled another world. Everyone had also seen stories where someone became a side character only to serve as the hero's stepping stone. But could someone please explain this to him? Why the hell did he transmigrate into a fox-eyed villain? And, judging from the looks of it, an insanely powerful one at that. The problem was, he had no idea how to fight. So what was he supposed to do now? Just a short while ago, he had been nothing more than a shut-in gamer sitting in front of his computer. After seeing the ending, where the protagonist was ambushed by that fox-eyed villain, his whole mind went into chaos. That was Hayden Lacey, the hero of the Northern Front, the man who led everyone toward the future in the middle of absolute despair. He was also his all-time favorite protagonist. And now he had died in such a ridiculous way. Worse, he had been stabbed in the back by his own student. That kind of tired plot twist had completely wasted 5 years of his youth and 38 million won. He instantly clicked cancel on the pre-order. Then he collapsed back onto his bed and started cursing that trash game. But no matter how hard he cursed, a tiny part of him still couldn't let go. Thinking back to the excitement he felt when he first started playing, it almost felt like yesterday. For a while, that game had helped him forget the pain of reality and become his tiny little shelter. But now, as far as he was concerned, Little Orchid was the only one who truly loved him. Just as he was watering the flower to calm himself down, his computer screen suddenly lit up at the worst possible time. He leaned closer and saw what looked like a private message from the operator. No, maybe it was just an automated reply. A few lines were written clearly in the chat box. We have confirmed that you canceled your DLC pre-order. It seems you are dissatisfied with the direction of the story. He froze for a second. What was that supposed to mean? Were they trying not to refund him? Just as he was getting ready to tear into them with a full-blown argument, another message came through. It was a link. He grabbed the mouse and clicked it without thinking. In an instant, a blinding light burst from the computer screen. Then, in the very next second, a strange and powerful force erupted from inside the screen. It actually sucked his head straight in. Yeah, that was obviously bad news. He had to shut the power off immediately. But the moment he pressed the power button, the pulling force only grew stronger. Then, he let out a scream. When he opened his eyes again, everything in front of him had completely changed. Was this a wasteland? He looked up, and his whole body froze. Wasn't this the game's final battle location? Just as he wondered why he had appeared here, a massive scorpion suddenly emerged up ahead. Its powerful claw shot straight toward his handsome face. He instinctively raised a hand to block it. He thought it was going to hurt like hell, but somehow, he felt absolutely nothing. His arm was like an iron wall, stopping the claw dead, and refusing to let it move, even another inch. Instead, with one casual strike, he landed a percentage-based critical hit on the scorpion. Just then, a blue window appeared before his eyes. It was the game's status window, reading, Superior Swordsman, Astonishing Intuition. Did that mean he had possessed the game's protagonist, Hayden Lacey? Then it was time to test it out. His power strike. With that, he suddenly drew his sword and slashed. The scorpion guard was ripped in half on the spot. Looking at the corpse on the ground, he couldn't help feeling a little excited. Did he get it? As expected, of Hayden Lacey. Ding. Activated basic SID swordsmanship. Normal attack. Half moon slash. Half moon slash sounded familiar. But it didn't seem like one of Hayden Lacey's skills. Suddenly, a terrible feeling rose in his mind. He immediately pulled off the cloak. Then, he slowly raised his sword. He aimed the blade at his own face. The air fell into dead silence. Ding! Character appearance, silver hair, fox eyes, poker face, talents included, born swordsman, demon king vessel, superior mana control, astonishing intuition, identity, Urian Kleipart Planzen. At that moment, his brain completely short-circuited. Damn it, why the hell was he Urian, the guy who stabbed Lacey in the back? 7 days later, at the Urian estate, the sunlight was especially bright. He looked at himself in the mirror. That sinister aura hit him head-on, forming a sharp contrast with the sunlight outside. As expected of a fox-eyed character, that face looked like a villain, no matter how he looked at it. The longer he stared, the more bitter he felt inside. He had already accepted the fact that he had transmigrated, but the thought of surviving in this world as a villain made his head ache. Still, at least this face was genuinely handsome. No wonder the original character had quite a bit of popularity. Just then, the door suddenly opened. A young man with a troubled expression walked in. At the same time, the butler's voice sounded from outside. Lord Herland has arrived. The moment he heard that name, Urian's expression shifted slightly. Herland? Wasn't he a direct bloodline member of the Kleipart family? Why was he here? Seeing Urian's cold expression, Herland's whole body trembled, and he nervously asked how Urian was feeling. Urian replied coldly, "Thanks to you, I'm doing fine." The moment those words landed, the air fell into an awkward silence. Herland could only force out a helpless laugh. Meanwhile, Urian was confused as well. This wasn't some random nobody. This was Herland. Damn it, Urian. What the hell did you usually do to these people? Seeing that Urian still wasn't saying anything, Herland cautiously asked, "Urian, there's been a rumor going around lately. They say you may have lost your memory." That caught Urian off guard. Was it because someone saw him searching for a way back to reality over the past few days? That really was suspicious. This couldn't continue. If the world found out Urian had lost his memories, his enemies would swarm him in an instant. In that case, he had no choice but to put on a little performance. Urian slowly smiled. "My dear Herland, do you believe that rumor too?" A terrifying pressure instantly made cold sweat pour down Herland's back, and he hurriedly denied it. Of course not. But inside he was panicking. That damn smile. Those eyes were impossible to read. It seemed Urian had already known he was here under orders from the Noble Elders Council. There was no helping it now. Thinking this, Herland cleared his throat twice, and gave a dry laugh. "Heh, don't mind the gossip among the servants too much. More importantly, the reason I came in person is because the Elders Council has sent a message." The so-called Elders Council was a group made up of old, noble lords. Since ancient times, they had placed extreme importance on bloodline. If any branch family showed even the slightest sign of overstepping, those stubborn direct-line nobles would never let it slide. And Urian, with his outstanding swordsmanship and magical ability, was clearly from a branch family, yet openly called himself the Imperial family's loyal dog. To them, Urian was a thorn in their side, someone they wanted to get rid of immediately. This message had to be handled carefully, so Urian asked calmly, "Then what is the message?" Herland answered with a trembling voice. "They ask that you participate in the Closed Eyes entrance test as an instructor." The Closed Eyes was an organization that secretly handled missions issued by the Imperial Palace. On the surface, they operated as the Imperial Guard, but in truth, they were a powerful armed agency directly under the royal family. Urian himself was also a member of the Closed Eyes, and now the Elders Council had specifically chosen someone they hated to take part in this. There was definitely a scheme behind it. Should he go? After thinking for a moment, Urian put on his signature smile. "Understood. I'll go, as the instructor." Herland froze on the spot. Wait, that wasn't right. The usual Urian would absolutely reject anything arranged by the Elders Council. What was going on today? Was he planning to break through head-on? Was that what he meant? Herland still couldn't figure it out, but he decided to leave first. If he stayed any longer, there was no telling what Urian might do. Just as Herland was about to leave, a voice suddenly stopped him. "Cousin, wait a second." Herland panicked instantly, cursing inwardly. Damn it. So he really wasn't planning to let me walk away in one piece? He was just about to turn around and explain himself. Maybe even play the family card, when a pot of orchids was handed to him. Along with it came Urian's sinister-looking face. "I wanted to give you these orchids. They can bring peace to the heart." After receiving the gift, Herland slowly walked out of Urian's room. Then, with a thud, he dropped to his knees. At that moment, he felt as if he had just taken a stroll through the gates of hell. Meanwhile, inside the room, Urian stared at the countless pots of orchids before him. He couldn't help feeling a little emotional. He really hadn't expected one casual sentence from a dream to turn the entire room into a flower garden. Whatever. Forget it. He should get dressed first. It was time to head out. He opened the wardrobe. Inside were countless bizarre outfits. Urian couldn't help wondering if the original owner had lost his mind. What kind of awful fashion sense was this? After a while, he finally found one outfit that looked somewhat normal. Fine. It was time to properly play the role of Urian. Sometime later, at Bayer Academy, Herland explained the test requirements and other related matters to him. But Urian wasn't really paying attention. Instead, he became interested in Bayer Academy itself. After all, this was the academy the original Urian had once attended. Surely there weren't many people left here who still remembered what Urian was like back then, right? A short while later, they finally arrived at the massive academy. He had seen it before in the game's visuals, but seeing it with his own eyes was still far more impressive. Since they had arrived at the academy, Urian told Herland to go back first. Herland was clearly afraid, but he still wanted to stay and see the final result. That made Urian pause slightly. But what caught his attention wasn't Herlin's attitude. It was the faint aura he had been able to see around Herlin since earlier. It couldn't be mana. Mana shouldn't be black. But if it was an emotion, then it was probably fear. That would make sense. To confirm his guess, Urian opened the system panel. Sure enough, he found a trait called Corrupt Color, which allowed him to see other people's negative emotions. So that was it. Thinking back on it now, Urian really had been skilled at reading people's emotions. He could use all kinds of human feelings to make enemies collapse before the fight even began. He could use anger to make opponents lose their reason, then force them to expose their own weaknesses. That was why Herland was so terrified of staying near him, and the reason Herland refused to leave was because the Elders' Council had ordered him to monitor Urian. The Elders' Council really was wary of him. Honestly, that made sense. After all, most of what Urian had built up in the past was infamy, and they were now looking for every possible way to get rid of him. On top of that, with rumors of his memory loss spreading everywhere, this was the perfect opportunity for the Elders' Council. Just as Urian was thinking, a distracted student suddenly bumped into his back. When the student saw who he had bumped into, his legs instantly gave out, and he collapsed to the ground. Urian was confused. He wasn't even angry, was he? Why did everyone look like they had seen a ghost? Sure, as a player, he also hated Urian, but the current him hadn't even done anything yet. In his eyes, the entire plaza was instantly covered in black mist. It was fear coming from countless people, and beneath that fear, there were countless traces of anger. At that moment, Urian really wanted to curse. Damn it, original owner, couldn't you have just been a decent person? How was he supposed to calm these students down now? Just then, a graceful figure stepped in front of the student. She lowered her head slightly and said, "Greetings, Lord Urian." Urian looked down at her and immediately found her familiar. Wasn't this Erin Donation? She was one of the game's side characters and a member of the Magic Tower of the Atlantan Empire. At only 24 years old, she had mastered the fifth element and reached the fifth circle, making her a genius mage. She was currently serving as a full professor at Bayer Academy. In the Academy storyline, she had given Lacey plenty of advice and was a classic good guy. But why would someone like Erin take the initiative to speak to Urian? Did they know each other? Whatever. For now, he could use her to ease the atmosphere. But in the next second, a purple aura suddenly rose around Erin. That wasn't fear. No, that was hatred. Wait a second. Could someone explain this? What the hell had Urian done to her? Erin was a high-ranking mage. She definitely wouldn't provoke someone for no reason. It seemed the only way to settle this mess was to say something that matched Urian's character. Urian spoke coldly. "A half-blood from the Denacion family? Who gave you permission to speak to me?" The moment those words fell, the surroundings sank into dead silence. But inside, Urian was already losing it. Why did this bastard's body automatically say something like that? Now things were even worse. The commotion hadn't calmed down at all. Instead, the tension only grew sharper. Even if it was extreme, he had no choice but to keep acting like Urian. Urian slowly drew the sword at his waist. "Because you're a half-blood, you can't even understand human speech?" Reflected in the blade were the terrified expressions of the two people before him, along with his handsome yet dangerous face. Do you know what sound a person makes when they die? Good. They were scared. Now they should calm down, right? But things went completely against his expectations. The moment Urian drew his sword, Erin immediately entered a combat stance. Before Urian could explain anything, a bolt of lightning shot toward him. His body's muscle memory made him raise his wrist instantly, blocking the attack head-on. Using that chance, Erin quickly ordered everyone to get away from the plaza. And in that single moment of distraction, Urian had already blinked right in front of her. With that handsome face suddenly so close, Erin's cheeks actually flushed slightly. She immediately gathered all the mana in her body, condensed lightning, and fired it straight ahead. Urian dodged the attack smoothly with his agile footwork. Then he leapt back to create distance, silently marveling at how terrifying her attack was. More than that, it seemed to carry some kind of intense emotion. At that moment, a memory flashed through Erin's mind. In the past, she had been nothing more than a second-rate mage, and her branch family bloodline had filled her with deep insecurity. Then Urian, who had also been born from a branch family, appeared before the public. Back then, he had been bright, confident, and perfect. From that moment on, Erin had fallen completely in love. Finally, one day, Erin gathered her courage and handed Urian a love letter. But her confession was brutally rejected. From that moment on, anger toward Urian began building in Erin's heart. And now that she had met Urian again, she finally unleashed all that anger on him. Unfortunately, Urian's movement was just too agile, and Aaron couldn't land a single hit. Her face grew redder and redder from frustration. Urian sighed helplessly. Looks like it was time to wrap this up. The moment that thought crossed his mind, he had already blinked behind Aaron. Then he lightly tapped the back of Aaron's head with the hilt of his sword. All right, that's enough joking around. Aaron finally snapped back to her senses. She immediately shouted at Urian, "What exactly are you trying to do? Are you looking down on me? You clearly saw my opening, so why didn't you use the moonlight sword?" Urian replied in a low voice, "Are you that curious, Miss Aaron?" In that instant, Aaron's face flushed bright red, and she thought Urian had seen through her feelings. But then Urian continued, "Cousin Herland is here for the first time. We need you to guide us to the testing ground. After all, everyone seems quite frightened." The moment he said that, Aaron went completely speechless and froze on the spot. Urian calmly added, "Do you understand now? Please lead the way, half-blood." Even though Aaron was unwilling from the bottom of her heart, Urian was still the examiner, so she couldn't refuse. In the end, she had no choice but to become their walking guide. The truth was, Aaron's question had actually hit Urian where it hurt. The moonlight sword was Urian's signature blade. When aura wrapped around a weapon, the edge would normally glow with faint light. But Urian's sword was different. Its blade would turn blue, as if it were drawing in moonlight. He had used that sword to cut down countless demon heads, and people named it the Moonlight Sword, out of both awe and fear. It was the crystallization of Urian's power, practically his personal ultimate technique. The problem was, how could the current Urian possibly know how to use something like that? Hopefully, Aaron hadn't grown suspicious. Otherwise, his whole act as Urian would completely fall apart. A short while later, Urian finally arrived at Bayer Academy's training field. Countless students who had come to take the closed eyes entrance test were already gathered there. Urian spoke. "Greetings, everyone. I am re-examiner for this closed eyes entrance test." Looking at the students before him, Urian honestly hadn't figured out how to test them at first. But after fighting Aaron, he suddenly came up with the perfect method. Now it was time for the show. Urian asked calmly, "Do all of you wish to be selected for the closed eyes?" Only a few people answered, and their voices were pathetically small. Seeing that, Urian became even more certain his plan would work. He sneered, "Ha! What a bunch of cowards scared out of their minds. You've never even seen a truly dangerous gaze, and the swords at your waists look like decorations. It's laughable. Remember this, the closed eyes you admire is the bloodiest and filthiest place in the Empire. As your senior, I'll give you a chance to experience that early. Now then, the closed eyes entrance test begins. The passing condition is simple. Kill me." The moment those words came out, everyone below was stunned, unable to believe what they had just heard. This was Urian's plan. Provoke them, use their fear against them, and make them collapse before the fight even started. Urian continued, "What's wrong? The test only ends when I die, or when no one here wishes to join the closed eyes anymore. Come on, prepare yourselves to fight for your lives." As his voice fell, the air sank into dead silence. Suddenly, someone in the crowd raised a hand. Urian thought it was the first person brave enough to step forward, but instead, the student said 3 words, "I give up." Once the first person broke, one student after another began raising their hands. Even the second son of the Torso family, who had gotten in through connections, was affected by the atmosphere and reluctantly raised his hand as well. In the end, every single person raised their hand. Urian smiled faintly. He sheathed his sword, turned around, and said, "Everyone has withdrawn. The test is over." In truth, he was panicking like crazy inside. Thank goodness he had Urian's face. In moments like this, it really worked wonders. He instinctively glanced at Aaron behind him, thinking she would also be covered in fear. But something seemed off. Why couldn't he sense any negative emotions from her at all? Had corrupt color malfunctioned? If that trait suddenly stopped working, things would get seriously troublesome. But at that moment, Aaron was thinking of the bright and confident senior Urian from back then, and her heart was filled with love and admiration. Since those were positive emotions, that was why corrupt color had suddenly stopped working. A short while later, Urian and Herland arrived at the headquarters of the Closed Eyes. To test whether corrupt color had really malfunctioned, Urian deliberately placed both hands on Herland's shoulders. A black aura immediately appeared. Looks like it wasn't broken after all. Now he could relax. Just then, a young boy hurried over to Urian. He didn't hold back his praise. "Lord Urian, you were truly incredible. I'm Laszlo, in charge of odd jobs for the Closed Eyes. It's such an honor to meet you." Listening to Laszlo ramble on and on, Urian started getting a little impatient. He was just about to cut him off when Laszlo continued, "Oh right, I heard the second son of the Torso family also took the test. Even so, you showed him no mercy. As expected of a true model of the closed eyes. The moment those words came out, Herland flinched, as if he had just heard something extremely dangerous. His expression darkened at once. You brat. Are you saying the second son of the Torso family failed? You're nothing but a trainee, yet you dare act so arrogantly. You know full well the relationship between the Kleipart family and the Torso family, and yet, before he could finish, Urian interrupted him. Cousin Herland, that's a strange thing to say. The strange one should be the Torso family. As far as I remember, the closed eyes never recruit nobles. The moment he said that, Herland panicked. He asked in a trembling voice, Aren't you a noble too? Urian suddenly leaned his face close to Herland's. A noble? How interesting. I'm from a branch family, a half-blood of the Kleipart family. I'm not a noble. I'm the Imperial family's dog, and as for the second son of the Torso family, he was supposed to fail during the second round of document screening. Yet he still came to take the closed eyes test. Was the Torso family trying to strictly train its heir? Or was there some kind of scheme hidden inside this test? Seeing that the scheme had been exposed, Herland had already started imagining what kind of ending awaited him. But Urian suddenly laughed and changed his tone. Of course, that couldn't be true. Maybe it was just a misunderstanding. Otherwise, that would be truly unfortunate. Hearing that, Herland quietly looked away. He understood exactly what those words meant. This was his one and only warning. If it happened again, Urian would not be so forgiving. That afternoon, after completing the task, Urian returned to his estate. After everything that happened, he had deeply realized how important strength was. It seemed he really needed to increase his combat power, and the best method was naturally the moonlight sword in front of him. So Urian picked up the moonlight sword from the table. Then he tried injecting mana into it. But in the very next second, the deep blue glow on the sword suddenly vanished. He couldn't activate it directly. As expected, it wasn't going to be that easy. Thanks to Urian's trait, Born Swordsman, there wasn't much of a problem with his actual swordsmanship. The moment he held the sword, he could clearly see the path the blade was supposed to follow. But that alone was far from enough. Swordsmen on Urian's level weren't exactly rare in the Empire. Just among the named characters, there were dozens, maybe even hundreds of them. The true difference between Urian and them lay in his absolute talent for controlling aura and mana. But could the current him really do that? If mana flowed backward, it could damage his organs. Controlling mana was an extremely dangerous thing to begin with. After thinking it over, Urian still decided to give it a try. After all, he would have to face this sooner or later. If the game's concept of mana was the same as this world's, then after playing the game hundreds of times, he already knew the general method. First, move the mana stored in the heart through the mana pathways inside the body. Among the 38 mana pathways, 6 major pathways were especially important. The one in the head mattered most, since it connected the core of mana between the heart and the brain. As long as he activated that point, mana would naturally erupt from within his body. Then, by transferring that mana outside the body, he could complete the Moonlight Sword. He looked closely. Alright, he had definitely overestimated himself. The Moonlight Sword hadn't truly been completed. It was only a half-baked version. Sure, he had barely managed to make it work, but the glow was pathetically weak. Could this even be called the Moonlight Sword? At most, it was a crescent sword. Still, on the first day, at least he managed to raise the moon. After that, Urian immediately headed to the training field. He swung his sword, and the 3 wooden dummies in front of him were sliced into pieces in an instant. Good. Now he had finally gained the basic strength a knight should have. All that remained was completing the Moonlight Sword. But at this point, his game knowledge was starting to fall short. In a situation like this, he needed to ask someone, and it had to be someone who knew Urian very well. Just then, a maid stepped forward and informed him that a visitor had arrived. Perfect timing. Maybe this visitor knew Urian well, but the one who arrived was Laszlo. His appearance honestly caught Urian off guard. Urian asked, Laszlo, what brings you here? Laszlo swallowed nervously. About yesterday's test at Bayer Academy. The captain asked you to confirm the results. Urian was confused. He was pretty sure he had already said it yesterday. Laszlo awkwardly scratched his head. Well, according to the rules, we have to hear the result directly from the examiner before reporting it. Urian was speechless. Laszlo had actually come all this way for something so minor. Test result, 0 qualified applicants. Reported like that. But as soon as he said that, Urian suddenly thought of something. Wait, wasn't there someone available right now who knew him well? The captain of the closed eyes. That person definitely knew Urian very well. He could ask for guidance while also setting up a little trap for the Kleipart family. making sure they stopped playing tricks with the closed eyes. Some time later, Urian and Laszlo rode a carriage to the headquarters of the closed eyes, the Adlatan Imperial Palace. Almost at the same time, everyone inside headquarters fell into chaos. Even the captain of the closed eyes stopped what she was doing. After waiting quietly for a moment, a guide came to invite him in. Good. Then, it was time to meet her. Urian's superior, the captain of the closed eyes, Udwin Baradiel. She was the sole heir of the fallen noble house Baradiel. With overwhelming strength and leadership, she had earned her high position, and she was the only person capable of commanding these closed eyes, who were loyal only to the imperial family. Her presence in person had to be intense, right? Honestly, Urian was a little nervous. He pushed open the door. But what appeared before him wasn't the huge imposing warrior he had imagined. It was an absurdly small girl. Odwin looked at Urian with a tired expression. Urian, welcome. It's been a while. I heard you were injured. Are you all right? Wait a second. This was the captain of the closed eyes, Odwin? Why was she so tiny? She was completely different from what he had imagined. He did remember the setting saying she was small, but he never expected her to be this small, and she even looked like a young girl. Was the original really like this? Suddenly, Odwin pointed straight at him. You bastard. Were you about to say that every time we meet, you think I'm tiny? Urian hurriedly waved his hands in denial, while inwardly thinking that the captain really was something else. She could actually read his mind. Right after that, Odwin stopped looking at him and lowered her head to continue handling documents. How are your injuries? Report. At that moment, Urian hesitated. The person before him was probably the one who knew the original Urian best out of everyone he had met so far. He couldn't speak carelessly. If he said the wrong thing, things could get troublesome. The two behind him were probably already watching closely. Even someone as arrogant as Urian should still show basic respect toward his captain. In that case, it was time for another performance. Urian said in a low voice, "Thank you for your concern. My injuries were not light, but they were not enough to shake my loyalty to the imperial family." The moment he said that, Odwin showed a puzzled expression. In that instant, Urian felt like he was done for. It seemed he had guessed wrong. Odwin stood up and slowly walked over to him. She took out her sword and lightly pressed the tip under his chin. How strange. Do you usually talk like that? You sound completely unfamiliar. Through corrupt color, Urian saw red aura beginning to rise from Odwin. It was suspicion. At that moment, his brain completely short-circuited again. He wanted to curse the original owner. Urian, you bastard. How did you usually treat your superior? In that case, he had no choice but to be a little more forceful, like a proper villain. So Urian suddenly grabbed Odwin's sword and spoke coldly. Is there a problem? That line worked immediately. The suspicion around Odwin disappeared, and she simply shot him a fierce glare. Then, she turned around and said, Normally, you can't even be bothered to come to headquarters. When you do show up, you just drop off a report, then leave. Since when did you become so loyal? Odwin's words made cold sweat run down Urian's back. Inside, he was cursing like crazy. He had thought that even if Urian was arrogant, he would still know how to keep things professional. Turns out this guy really dared to do anything. Then he had no choice but to be even more forceful. Urian said coldly, I've been resting because of my injuries, so I came in person to report the situation while I was at it. Is there a problem with that? Or do I need the captain's permission just to come here? Odwin shot him a sideways glance and replied calmly, I heard you were delirious after your injury, but from the looks of it, you seem to have recovered. All right, report. Were there any useful candidates in this test? Urian answered flatly, No. He thought Odwin would be at least a little surprised by that result, but she remained unusually calm, as if she had expected it. Heh, that makes sense. After all, you're the disciple of Sword Saint Hayden. Ordinary standards would never catch your eye. But surely there were at least a few with potential as spies, right? The moment she finished speaking, Urian answered almost instantly, No. That finally made Odwin pause. Wait, so you didn't accept a single one? Why would you do that? Are you insane? The closed eyes is short on manpower right now. We needed at least one new recruit. Odwin's sudden outburst made Urian panic inside. But on the surface, he remained completely calm. Urian said coldly, being short on people is not a reason to accept trash. None of those candidates were suited for the closed eyes. Hearing that, Odwin sat back down and forced herself to calm down. This is absurd. Get out of my sight. Leave, now. Urian spoke again. Before I leave, I have a proposal. The moment Odwin heard that, she immediately became wary. Urian took a letter from his coat. Then he placed it on the desk. This is a summary of the issues I noticed during the test. In short, the candidates lack proper fear and respect for the closed eyes. Odwin opened the envelope. Then, she read its contents aloud. No matter what accidents occur during the test, the closed eyes will bear no responsibility. Odwin paused for a moment, then laughed. Ha, what is this? Am I supposed to understand it this way? Fight with the intent to kill. That's what this means, right, Urian? Urian said nothing. He only smiled faintly. The meaning was obvious enough. After thinking for a moment, Odwin seemed to believe it might actually be useful. So she said she would submit it to the council first, though she couldn't guarantee it would pass. Seeing that Odwin had agreed, Urian had no intention of staying any longer and turned to leave. But Odwin stopped him again. Wait, there's a letter from the Imperial Secretariat in your office. Go check it. Urian turned back and gave his signature fake smile. Understood. After Urian left, Odwin picked up the letter again and quietly thought it over. No matter what accidents occurred, the closed eyes would bear no responsibility. In other words, even if someone died during the test, they could walk away innocent under Imperial protection. So Urian really had noticed that the Elders Council and the Torso family had tampered with the test. He was planning to confront them head-on. Your little tricks have been exposed. If you try anything again, it won't end as easily next time. That was the message Urian wanted to send, wasn't it? After suffering one serious injury, Urian had completely changed. In the past, Urian had simply carried out the Imperial family's orders with absolute loyalty, which was why people called him the Imperial family's dog. That emotionless beast, who never complained about those above him, was now trying to break free of his chains and gain a will of his own. Thinking that, Odwin couldn't help feeling a chill. Things were starting to get troublesome. She would have to keep a close eye on him. Meanwhile, a door appeared before Urian. That's right. This was Urian's office at the Closed Eyes headquarters. The Closed Eyes usually didn't need to stay on standby, so individual rooms were rarely assigned to members. Just how important did someone have to be to receive a private office? Feeling a little uneasy, Urian pushed open the office door, but what he saw inside instantly chilled his heart. More bizarre outfits, and all kinds of absurdly strange collectibles. This tasteless fox-eyed villain really had the worst sense of style imaginable. Just then, someone knocked on the door. It turned out to be Laszlo. Urian was starting to feel like he saw this guy every single day now. This time, Laszlo had come to deliver a letter from the Imperial Secretariat. After handing it over, Laszlo tried to escape as fast as possible, but Urian stopped him. Urian said, "Laszlo, move these statues to my carriage. They shouldn't be too heavy." Laszlo froze for a moment. Then his face lit up with excitement. Lord Urian was giving him another task. At this rate, graduating from trainee status was no longer just a dream. With that thought, he immediately got to work. But after taking just one step, he tripped over a messily piled statues. With a loud thud, Laszlo fell flat on his face. He was so terrified that he grabbed his sword and tried to slit his own throat as an apology. Seeing that he was way too nervous, Urian placed a hand on his shoulder and made a small joke. He had only meant to help him relax. "Laszlo, if you die, cleaning up afterward will be even more annoying. So just move them properly." Laszlo immediately shut his mouth and nodded furiously. Now it was time to check the letter from the Imperial Palace. In simple terms, the letter only meant one thing. If your injuries are healed, get back to work. The wording was polite, but it was basically just them ordering him around. Still, the timing was convenient. He still hadn't found a clue about the Moonlight Sword, and real combat experience was important too. This mission was called Resonance Stone Maintenance. In the game, there were monsters known as demons. After the demon god Barbados died, the lingering obsessions he left behind, the creatures possessed by them, or beings formed from corpses were all called demons, and the thing capable of suppressing them was the resonance stone mentioned in this mission. Urian wasn't a mage, so that meant this mission was probably about escorting the mage responsible for maintaining the stone. There was no reason to refuse. Dealing with demons was dangerous, but if the mission succeeded, the recent suspicious rumors about Urian losing his memories should disappear as well. The only question was, who was the mage he needed to escort this time? Hopefully, it was someone decent. Sometime later, the escort mission with the Blue Lion Knights officially began. Seeing Urian return to active duty, everyone immediately started whispering among themselves. "I knew it. Someone like him probably wouldn't even bleed if you stabbed him. How could he actually be injured?" Just as Urian expected, public opinion was starting to move in a better direction. At that moment, Perrin and Hayan from the Night Order came forward to greet him. Urian naturally responded with a polite smile. "Everyone has worked hard. Let's do our best together." The two of them shuddered, then cautiously asked, Urian, will you be taking the carriage to the bamboo forest? You can leave the escorting to us. Please just relax comfortably. It sounded like thoughtful concern, but that wasn't really what it meant. They simply didn't want a branch family outsider stealing the spotlight from the noble knights. Urian cursed inwardly. Other people who transmigrated into another world lived like legends, yet he became a villain and had to deal with this nonsense. Still, riding in a carriage was definitely more comfortable than riding a horse. Fine, he would take it. The two of them immediately sighed in relief. Understood, then we'll inform you once Lady Erin arrives. The moment he heard that, Urian's expression changed sharply. Who did you just say? But in the next second, Erin was already greeting the knights with a bright smile. Hello everyone. The weather is lovely today. I'm Erin, the mage in charge of maintaining the resonance stones this time. However, the instant her eyes met Urian's, Erin almost choked. Urian also saw her clearly at that moment. Damn it, it really was that Erin. Perrin, forget what I said about taking the carriage. Erin's mind was already a complete mess. Why was Urian here? Wait, was he avoiding her? Perrin and Heian were confused too. What was going on? Why had Urian suddenly changed his mind? Was it because he thought his status was higher? Or had he already seen through them? Had he realized they were trying to keep him commanding from the rear, so he wouldn't steal their glory? As expected of someone who had survived factionless in the chaotic imperial court, feeling that burning stare on the back of his head, Urian felt uncomfortable all over. Why did the person he had to escort have to be Erin? She was seriously hard to deal with. In that case, he needed to finish the mission as quickly as possible. Avoid contact with Erin as much as possible. Then wrap everything up cleanly. In the blink of an eye, several hours passed, and they finally arrived at their destination, the bamboo forest. It was a small place, sure, but there wasn't even a welcoming crowd. Whatever. It was time to get to work. Soon, under Erin's command, everyone began organizing the equipment in an orderly manner. Once everything was ready, Erin went to the location of the resonance stones. One look was enough to shock her. Most of the resonance stones needed to be replaced. In other words, the barrier might briefly disappear during the replacement process. Fortunately, the actual replacement would be quick. After everything was prepared, Erin reluctantly came outside and called out to Urian. Urian, there's something I need to say. But before she could finish, Urian had already started walking away. Erin couldn't take it anymore. She grabbed Urian's sleeve. Wait a second. I have something important to say. Why do you keep avoiding me? Urian shook off Erin's hand and replied coldly. When exactly did I avoid you? You're the one who keeps clinging to me, Miss Erin. Erin was left speechless, and embarrassment made her face turn bright red. Enough. I'm trying to talk about something serious, so stop interrupting me. Just then, a strange pressure belonging to a demon suddenly swept over the area. Someone nearby immediately screamed in terror. A demon is here. What was going on? Why had a demon suddenly appeared? Had the barrier disappeared? Erin anxiously pointed at Urian and snapped, I told you I had the key, but you kept avoiding me. With a thunderous boom, Heian's body shot backward at terrifying speed and slammed into a wall, as if something had swatted him away. Urian looked up. What appeared before him was a demon. Not a five-horned one, not a one-horned one either. It was a two-horned demon. For his first real battle, wasn't this difficulty a little too busted? Erin tried to step forward and help, but Urian stopped her. Stop, it's too dangerous. Leave this to me. Each of us will handle our own task. You maintain the resonance stones and reactivate the barrier. I'll protect you until the maintenance is finished. Understood? Erin was irritated by his attitude, but there was no time for complaints. Urian, from now on, I need 7 minutes. Also, don't get injured. I don't have healing magic right now. Urian gave a faint laugh. Heh, getting injured would be the harder part. A two-horned demon. Deep down, he was scared out of his mind. But if he was Urian, this level of enemy should be nothing. While Urian stood there, lost in thought, Perrin arrived with the knights. Seeing Urian standing motionless, Perrin let out a laugh. What's wrong, Urian? Scared of a two-horned demon? Urian said nothing. Perrin paused, then leaned closer. His entire body froze. Are you smiling? That's right. Right now, he was Urian. In a life-or-death situation, he wasn't supposed to be afraid. He was supposed to enjoy it. With that thought, waves of light began radiating from Urian's body. Then he casually released a sword beam forward, and in an instant, a small part of the demon's body was sliced into several pieces. That move shocked everyone present. However, the demon didn't seem to have taken any real damage. Its massive fist arrived in front of Urian in the blink of an eye. The punch landed, The overwhelming force made Urian cough up crimson blood. Damn it, why did it hurt this much? He could barely breathe, but even a worm squirms when stepped on, so how could he give up here? Fine. Then it was time to test his incomplete Moonlight Sword. The moment the Moonlight Sword appeared, Urian's aura surged sharply. Sure, this wasn't even 1/4 of the real Moonlight Sword, but as a cheat ability, it should be enough. The demon roared. Then, it swung several punches at Urian. But he was Urian. Ding, trait activated, insight gauge. Heh. He could see it now. He could see every single trajectory of the demon's attacks. Since he could see the trajectories, dodging them would be easy. Seeing that, Perrin was completely stunned. What kind of joke was this? Was that still even human? At the same time, Aaron successfully repaired the resonance stones, and the barrier activated instantly. The demon's attention was immediately drawn toward it. That gave Urian an opening. Getting distracted while fighting him? What a stupid choice. His sword fell, and the deep blue light turned into a beautiful arc. It sliced straight across the demon's body. In the next second, the demon was split cleanly in two. This was Urian of the closed eyes. Everyone was completely stunned. More accurately, they were too shocked by that strike to even speak. Fear and unease began appearing on all their faces. That was only natural. Urian was a villain after all. Seeing that kind of power would scare anyone. But in the very next second, everyone suddenly burst into cheers. What was going on? Urian really hadn't expected that. Even Perrin looked like he wanted to say something, but couldn't quite get it out. Seeing how awkward Perrin looked, Urian told him to handle the cleanup, getting him a way out of the situation. After briefly greeting everyone, Urian went to a stream deep in the forest. Then he dropped down onto the ground and gasped for breath. That had scared him to death. For a moment, he really thought he was done for. The disgust, fear, and despair of fighting a demon were far more real than he had imagined. Actual combat was much bloodier than the game, especially the feeling of cutting down a demon. It was almost impossible to believe. Had the original Urian treated things like that as part of everyday life? Right now, even he was scared of himself, and the state he had entered while acting as Urian felt wrong too. His body had changed, but what if even his thoughts started changing with it? Forget it, he would think about that later. The real problem now was this incomplete Moonlight Sword. Because he hadn't activated it properly earlier, cracks had appeared in the Moonlight Sword, and its stability was terrible. Stability? Speaking of stability, Urian suddenly thought of a decent idea. A few days later, Urian returned to his estate with an uneasy heart. The mission had only taken a few days, but the massive mana consumption had left him exhausted. Still, when he saw the room redecorated according to his own preferences, he finally felt a little more at ease. As expected, orchids really did bring peace to the heart. All right, now that he had calmed down, it was time to check his gains. He opened the treasure chest, and a dazzling light burst from within. That's right. Inside were the resonance stones he had ordered people to purchase. These were the key items that would determine whether he could master the complete Moonlight Sword. In the game's worldview, all materials had mana capacity. Gems produced by the Empire were especially good in both conductivity and storage capacity, which was why resonance stones worked so well. If he borrowed the concept of resonance stones to store mana and placed a relay point between his body and the sword. But of course, finding a gem that matched his own mana closely enough would still be extremely difficult. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door. Urian thought it was a maid bringing in his meal. But once again, it was Laszlo. This guy was showing up way too often. Lord Urian, the captain has ordered you to personally report the mission results to the Imperial Secretariat. The Imperial Secretariat again. Were they trying to check his condition? It seemed their suspicion about his memory loss still hadn't disappeared after all. A short while later, Urian arrived at a place filled with gold and splendor. That's right, this was the Imperial Secretariat. The receptionist announced. Lord Urian of the Closed Eyes has come to visit Lord Sidon of the Secretariat. The receptionist soon replied politely, Lord Sidon is currently meeting an earlier guest. Please wait in the reception room. If they were making Urian wait, then that meant the other person's status was at least higher than his current position. Urian walked into the reception room, and couldn't help thinking how grand it was. Every corner screamed luxury. Then a sword lying on the sofa caught his attention. He picked it up, and saw that it was rather plain, completely out of place in such an extravagant room. Turning the blade over, he saw an inscription. It looked familiar, like he had seen it somewhere before. Before Urian could recall it, a sharp voice suddenly snapped, Put that sword down right now, traitor. Even without turning around, Urian knew exactly who that voice belonged to. The daughter of the prestigious knight family, House Londabelle, and one of Hayden Lacey's students. She was Linny Londabel, the character who in the original game story would die at the hands of Urian Kleipart. She was also Hayden's student, which meant she might be key to finding a way out of this game. Seeing the deep blue aura around her, Urian knew right away that this girl hated him as much as ever. Urian spoke calmly. I didn't expect someone like you, Miss Linny, to leave a sword lying around. Since you're here, does that mean the important guest who arrived before me was Sword Saint Hayden Lacey? Linny frowned. What does that have to do with you? Urian answered casually. I was only asking. After all, he was once my teacher too. The moment he said the word, teacher, the color around Linny instantly turned deep red. That was anger. Just then, the receptionist came to inform Linny to enter the secretariat office. Linny clearly didn't want to stay any longer and coldly left him with, let's hope we never meet again. But right after she said that, the receptionist informed her that Urian would be going in as well. For a brief moment, the air became painfully awkward. Linny's face flushed with irritation, while Urian smiled to smooth things over. Don't be so cold. We were fellow disciples, in a way. A short while later, the two entered the secretariat office together. Seaton greeted them with a smile. Linny didn't care for the greeting at all, and immediately asked, where is my teacher? Sidon replied, Sir Lacey left after assigning you a mission, Miss Linny, and with Duke Urian assisting, this is even better. Linny immediately snapped back. Are you joking? Why would I work with this traitor? Sidon ignored her reaction and continued with the mission. I would like the two of you to investigate the Imperial capital's slums. Urian frowned slightly. The slums? What's there to investigate? Sidon continued explaining. There are rumors that demons have appeared there. If the Imperial family intervenes directly, it may cause protests. From that perspective, the two of you are the most suitable choices. One of you is a member of the Closed Eyes, publicly tied to the Imperial family yet politically ambiguous, and the other is an Academy-affiliated knight. Since the Academy faction and the Imperial family have a poor relationship, sending you two to investigate is indeed the most reasonable option. Still, having to team up with Linny on a mission like this was seriously bad news. But as the Imperial family's dog, Urian couldn't refuse. He simply said, understood. I accept the mission. Linny shouted angrily, I refuse. Urian spoke calmly. Miss Linny, this is a mission personally entrusted by our teacher. Are you planning to disobey your master's order? In the end, under Urian's pressure, Linny had no choice but to reluctantly accept. Linny, the knight known as Hayden's prized disciple, would definitely keep a close watch on the traitor Urian during this mission. The problem was, Urian still didn't have his complete combat power. If only he had a gem that matched his mana. Just as that thought crossed his mind, the gem on Linny's chest caught Urian's attention. What was going on with that gem? Linny flinched in surprise and quickly replied, it's just a moonstone. Urian casually released a tiny bit of mana, and the moonstone immediately reacted violently. What a powerful resonance. Linny snapped, what are you doing? Urian smiled and explained, I wanted it so badly that I accidentally lost control. Huh. The answer had been right in front of him, all along. He had to get his hands on that kind of gem. A short while later, Urian rushed straight to a jewelry store and asked whether they had any moonstones. The clerk scratched his head. Our store doesn't sell moonstones. Other stores don't either. Aside from collectors, almost nobody wants them. They're also difficult to mine, so no one really deals in them. Urian frowned. So you're saying I can't get one? The clerk became terrified and hurriedly promised. Not for now, but we can search across the country. After getting a clear answer, Urian finally left the store reluctantly and met Linny outside. Now it was time to officially begin the mission. Linny tried to take the lead and follow the road signs. Seeing that, Urian quickly warned her, the slums are complicated. You can't trust the signs. Naturally, Linny didn't believe him. Compared to trusting Urian, she would rather trust the signs. That was honestly annoying. But in a way, she was right. Still, the slums were a notorious beginner's nightmare. An absurdly difficult map even the developers had admitted was brutal. Linny said coldly, don't think I don't know what you're planning. Traitor, you must want Sword Saint Hayden's prized disciple to fail, right? I won't let you get what you want. And Urian, the next Sword Saint, will be me. With this much hostility from his teammate, it seemed there was no convincing her. After some time passed, Linny, who had followed the map, completely lost her way. In the end, the two of them returned to where they started. Linny was just about to say something when a middle-aged man suddenly spoke up, saying he knew the roads around here well. If they wanted him to guide them, all they had to do was buy him a drink. Hearing that, Linny immediately agreed. Urian was speechless. How was this girl so easy to scam? He tried to warn her, but the man completely ignored him. And so, the three of them walked straight into a tavern. The owner stated the price first. 30 per person. That made Linny pause. But not because it was expensive. It was because it was way too cheap. With that, she pulled out an entire pouch of gold coins. A short while later, 3 cups of alcohol were brought over. Seeing Linny about to drink hers, the man revealed a sinister smile. But in the next second, a hand suddenly appeared and snatched Linny's cup away. Urian spoke coldly. Wait, did you spike this drink? Hearing that, the man flew into a rage and angrily accused Urian of slandering him. Naturally, Urian had no intention of indulging him. He placed the cup directly in front of the man. Then, drink it, or do you need me to feed it to you myself? Linny, who had a strong sense of justice, naturally couldn't stand that behavior and immediately tried to stop him. Enough, Urian. But the moment the name Urian came out, fear appeared on the faces of the 2 men. Still, they quickly remembered that the people around them were their own men, and that fear vanished almost instantly. One of them slowly pulled a dagger from his coat. Seeing that, Urian stopped pretending. All right, question time is over. Now it's interrogation time. As he spoke, a terrifying pressure began rising from his body. Seeing that, no one dared to move. They could only stand there frozen. Urian said coldly, "Old man, tell your companions to put away their killing intent. Otherwise, they'll end up just like this cup." The man panicked, and fear surged across his face. He quickly turned around and ordered his underlings to retreat. His men didn't dare act up. Trembling, they pushed open the tavern door and left. Urian smiled faintly. "Good. Very cooperative. Answer a few questions, and I'll let you turn yourself in safely." The moment he heard he had to turn himself in, the man shuddered. Urian continued, "What's wrong? Compared to death, I'd still recommend surrendering." The man silently lowered his head and agreed to turn himself in. A short while later, Urian and Linny walked out of the tavern. They had also obtained information about the slums. Linny lowered her head and said, "Failing to notice it beforehand was my mistake." Urian looked at her calmly. Judging from that expression, her confidence had taken a hit. Linny then asked, "How did you figure it out? How did you know that man spiked the drink?" So, instead of clinging to her embarrassment, she cared more about improving herself. As expected of Linny Londabelle, if only she didn't hate Urian so much. Urian said calmly, "I simply sensed the killing intent inside the cup. Before we even entered the tavern, I had already detected hostility. I detect life signs through mana. All things contain mana, and mana reacts strongly to other mana. What that man revealed was hostility." Linny thought for a moment. "So, it's a little like a bat's echolocation." Then she asked another question. "I still don't understand something. You didn't ask that man about the demon. Instead, you asked about the living conditions in the slums. Why?" Urian asked back. "Why? We came here to investigate whether a demon appeared, didn't we?" "Of course it was for that." "Miss Linny, are you familiar with demonization?" Demonization is the standard phenomenon where the demon god's lingering will parasitizes a non-human creature and manifests as a demon. Normally speaking, the slums have a special location. The surrounding areas are covered by resonant stones, so demons shouldn't be able to enter from the outside. There are also no forests nearby, no wild animals, only humans. In other words, the only possible hosts for the demon are humans. The moment he said that, Linny's expression changed sharply, turning extremely grim. Urian continued, "There are 3 locations here where 6 households received fever medicine within the past week. Demonization is accompanied by a high fever. If I'm wrong, I'll follow your command from that point on." Linny froze, unsure whether she should believe the person in front of her. But it didn't seem like trusting him would hurt her. So for now, she would believe him once. In the blink of an eye, the sky gradually darkened. During that time, Urian and Linny had checked 5 households in total, leaving only the final one. Linny looked unusually relieved at the moment. After all, not finding any demonization was definitely good news. Urian only smiled faintly. This was the last house. Urian also hoped there wouldn't be any demonization. But reality often turned out to be the exact opposite of what people wished for. The moment they arrived at the door, a thick, bloody stench belonging to a demon rushed toward them, and the panicked expression on the old woman inside made Urian even more certain that something was wrong here. So, he decisively pushed open the door. "Thank you for your cooperation." Linny was startled by what he did, and quickly reminded him that they should state their purpose first. But, before she could finish, Urian cut her off. "Miss Linny, you're too kind. That kindness will get you hurt one day." Once inside, Urian immediately saw 3 plates of food on the table, and one of them was especially thin and watery. So that was it. Not only had fever medicine been added, but sleeping pills too. Urian spoke calmly. "Heh, this soup laced with sleeping pills. Were you planning to feed it to the demon behind that door?" Hearing that, Linny was instantly shocked. The old woman trembled all over. Then in the next second, she rushed past the two of them like a madwoman and charged straight toward the door. But the moment she opened it, a massive, gaping maw was already aimed right at her. With a scream, blood splattered across the entire room, making the scene horrifying. As expected, it was a demon. Seeing the demon appear, Linny didn't hesitate at all. She grabbed her sword and moved to take it down. But how could such a reckless attack possibly work? With just one strike, the demon sent Linny flying several meters away. Looking at the sword in her hand, Urian immediately realized that Linny probably hadn't awakened yet. At this rate, she was definitely in danger. In that case, he would take it down himself. Thinking that, Urian stepped forward. Linny still tried to help, but he stopped her. No need. This is my job. Besides, how could I let the Sword Saint student get hurt? I don't want to cause any unnecessary controversy. The problem was, his moonlight sword still wasn't complete, and he couldn't let Miss Linny grow suspicious. In that case, he would crush it with raw output. Ding, trait activated. Insight. In just an instant, the demon's weak points and attack trajectories all appeared before Urian's eyes. So, he blinked forward and cut the demon down to a heavily wounded state. But the moment Urian turned his head, the demon actually recovered, and Miss Linny completely ignored his warning, insisting on fighting the demon to the death. Worse, she made a fatal mistake. Who in the world charges up a big move during a direct clash? In the next second, the demon's massive hand clamped tightly around Linny. With just a slight squeeze, she spat out a mouthful of blood. Just as Linny thought she was finished, Urian, standing behind the demon, had finished charging his attack. Normal attack. His sword thrust forward, piercing straight through the demon's heart. Seeing that, Linny's body trembled slightly. She could hardly believe it. He had pierced through the demon with the moonlight sword alone. How had he done it? Urian gave a mocking smile. Heh, let's put it this way. The moonlight sword simply met an opponent unworthy of it. After dealing with the demon, the two returned to the Imperial Palace by carriage. Just before they entered the gate, Linny called out to Urian with a dark expression. The reward is all yours. I contributed nothing to this mission. Although you completed the mission, I still hate you. My teacher once said that power always comes with responsibility. Slaying a demon is certainly impressive, but I also saw you abuse force against innocent people. Now I finally understand why my teacher expelled you. You have no restraint. Urian replied calmly, restraint is a weapon for cowards. Miss Linny, I am someone who has nothing to do with nobility. After all, I am not one of those pure-blooded nobles who need the masses to restrain themselves for their sake. You should know there are people like that in this world. After saying that, Urian turned and left. Linny didn't understand. What do you mean? Urian gave no answer. Linny fell into thought. He really was a difficult person to understand. Restraint was not only a virtue of nobles, but also a virtue of all knights. While Linny was thinking, her uncle Elgin arrived in a carriage to pick her up. In the carriage, Elgin asked who the young man from earlier was. Linny introduced him with a smile. That was Urian. The moment he heard it was Urian, Elgin remembered. A noble like us, yet he pressured a nursing home, as expected of a branch family. The moment she heard branch family, Linny seemed to finally understand what Urian meant by having nothing to do with nobility. Meanwhile, in Captain Odwin's office, Odwin looked serious as she asked, Urian, what exactly did you do? Hearing that, Urian's heart trembled. He thought to himself that he hadn't really done anything bad lately, right? Was the tavern asking for compensation? Or had the residents of the slums protested because they were afraid of him? Odwin looked down at the documents. The criminal who was being watched by the closed eyes turned himself in. When asked why, he trembled while shouting your name. Wasn't your mission to investigate the demon sightings? So it was that. Urian calmly replied, that has nothing to do with me. Maybe he suddenly grew a conscience. I wouldn't know. Odwin looked suspiciously at his fake expression. Stop pretending. This was definitely your doing. Confirm your mission funds and go home. The moment he heard mission funds, Urian became interested. Perfect timing. He needed money to buy moonstones. He looked carefully. Written there was 11,000 na. Urian remembered that na was roughly equivalent to dollars. 15 million won a month? That was insane. Seeing his expression, Odwin thought he was dissatisfied with how little it was and explained, you were on injury leave, so it's lower than usual. Hearing that, Urian was completely shocked. This counted as low? Was this game's sense of money completely broken? Wait, there was more information below. After deducting maintenance fees, subscription fees, and installment payments for various art pieces, the actual deposit was 900 NA. Alright, so the problem had never been the world. It had always been Urian. He was finished. Buying moonstones would require a huge amount of money, but the current Urian didn't even have savings. Urian looked up and asked, Odwin, are there any new missions? Odwin looked at him in confusion. This is the first time you've ever asked that on your own. You're broke, aren't you? Too bad. There are no missions right now. If something comes up, I'll contact you. I told you before not to buy luxury goods recklessly. At that moment, Urian was completely speechless. The original owner was ridiculous. How had he bought this many art pieces? Then, Odwin added, if you sold all those luxury goods to a gallery, you could probably buy an island. Sell the luxury goods? Right, that was it. He could just sell them all. Since he had found a solution, there was no reason to delay. It was time to move. Odwin watched Urian walk away in disbelief, her heart filled with shock. Urian really had changed. Sometime later, at the IDEX Moso Art Gallery, the appraiser Felso rushed over the moment he saw Urian arrive. He shook Urian's hand and greeted him politely. Urian only gave a calm response before bringing him over to appraise the painting he planned to sell. The covering cloth was lifted. A delicate oil painting of a wheat field appeared before them. Felso immediately exclaimed, "Oh, this unique brushwork looks like the work of Crucius Vincent. However, this is a forgery." The moment he heard that, Urian wanted to beat the original owner half to death. He had collected so many paintings, yet he couldn't even tell real from fake. This painting had been hanging at the entrance of the estate, so Urian had assumed it was some famous masterpiece. Then, Felso continued, "Still, this is the first time I've seen such a refined forgery. I'm willing to buy it for a fair price of 1,000 pina." 1,000 pina was better than nothing. So Urian agreed anyway. After all, every little bit helps. Just then, a voice suddenly sounded from the side. "Are you sure this transaction is all right? That painting is clearly authentic." Urian looked over and saw that it was Erin. He truly hadn't expected her to appear here. "Miss Erin, you're saying this is authentic?" Erin replied, "Of course. My cousin's painting is exhibited here, so I naturally recognize it. But that's not the important part. What I'm saying is that there are very few painters in the Empire who can handle this kind of oil painting, and the signature in the corner is absolutely Crucius's genuine signature." Seeing his plan exposed, Felso hurriedly tried to explain. "How could that be? I must have missed the signature." But after being deceived, how could Urian possibly listen to Felso's excuses? He asked coldly, "So, Mr. Felso, were you trying to deceive me?" Felso was terrified. He fell to the floor, fear spreading across his face. Erin reached out and stopped Urian, who looked like he was about to act. "Urian, stop. It's normal for appraisers to make mistakes. People make errors." After she stopped him, Urian remembered that there were quite a few people around. It really wasn't a good place to act violently, so he changed from physical action to a verbal warning. "Mr. Felso, should the appraisal result be corrected?" Hearing that, Felso hurriedly dropped to both knees and spoke in a trembling voice. "I'm truly sorry. If it's authentic, our gallery simply can't afford it. Even if we sold everything, we couldn't buy this painting." Urian smiled faintly. "Ha, there are always moments in life when people are powerless. Still, this is troublesome. What should I do with this painting?" Erin sighed helplessly. "I'll help. I know someone who will buy Crucius's works unconditionally. I can introduce you, but you have to agree to 2 conditions. First, please don't punish him in any way." Urian nodded. "Fine, though I wasn't planning to pursue it anyway. After all, he wasn't the real Urian." Erin continued, "Second, help me with something. It's something only you can do." Urian agreed as well. "Fine. I don't have any missions right now anyway. Deal." Erin immediately added, "Don't misunderstand. I'm not helping you out of kindness. I'm only trying to repay the favor from before." Then, Erin began explaining the second thing she wanted Urian to help with. Recently, something strange had been happening at Bayer Academy. Every evening, the night patrol guards would be attacked by a so-called ghost that appeared out of nowhere. As for whether it was actually a ghost, no one knew. To investigate the situation, the two quickly headed to Bayer Academy. After arriving at the academy, Erin told Urian what she thought. "I suspect it's a demon. It may have slipped in last time when the resonance stones were being maintained and the barrier weakened. Everyone at the academy is uneasy right now. I wanted to handle it myself, but I was worried it might be too troublesome." Just as Erin was explaining, a figure suddenly appeared before them. This person was also a professor at Bayer Academy, Hardy. He smiled and said, "What an honor to see Duke Urian here. As for you, Duke Erin, you still ended up asking someone else to handle it?" Erin explained, "I'm doing this for the students' safety. Urian is skilled at slaying demons." Hardy gave a disdainful laugh. "If you want to escape the Branch family label, shouldn't you be working even harder yourself?" The moment he said that, Aaron instantly snapped back at full force. Heh, the one who should work harder is you, Sir Hardy. Didn't you almost fail your last thesis review? If you have time for this, maybe go write more papers. Those words hit Hardy right where it hurt, and he replied coldly, as expected of someone from a branch family, you have no sense of propriety. The moment he said that, Aaron panicked. On the surface, Hardy was insulting her, but those words also dragged Urian, who was standing behind her, into it. She turned around and saw that Urian had already drawn his sword, ready to strike. His speed was terrifying. There was no time to stop him. Aaron could only squeeze her eyes shut, but the blood she imagined never splattered. When she opened her eyes, she saw that Urian had struck the wall beside them, and inside that wall, there were demons hiding everywhere. Urian reacted instantly and slashed forward, destroying part of the demons on the spot. But some of them still escaped and latched onto Hardy. Hardy immediately screamed for help. Urian gave a wicked smile. Demons don't care whether you're from the main line or a branch family. If you want to live, why not beg this branch family man to save you? As soon as he finished speaking, the scattered little demons began gathering rapidly. Eventually, they fused into an enormous rat. Urian smiled coldly. Just a footless demon. Watching weaklings gather together for one last struggle really is laughable. With that, he slashed out with his sword. The demon was destroyed in an instant. That scene left both Aaron and Hardy stunned. They hadn't expected Urian to defeat the demon so easily. A short while later, while Aaron was repairing the wall, she asked Urian, how did you know the demons were hiding there? Naturally, Urian had no intention of revealing corrupt color, so he casually brushed the question aside. Aaron didn't push further. She was in an excellent mood anyway. By the way, with Duke Urian here, Sir Hardy still dared to look down on branch families. He really got put in his place this time. Her words left Urian a little confused. Aaron smiled. Seriously? Did you even forget what you said yourself? You once said I was a half-blood of the Donasian family, didn't you? So that was what she meant. This girl really held grudges. In that case, he might as well make things clear. Urian said calmly, whether branch family or main family, blood is still red. So what he said back then had been a kind of oath. For a moment, Aaron was dazed. Was she seeing things? Was Urian actually apologizing? It wasn't exactly a formal apology. But Aaron still said softly, thank you. Thank you for helping me solve this problem. Now that the demon had been dealt with, Aaron also had to fulfill her promise and introduce Urian to the buyer. A short while later, an old man was trembling as he held the painting Urian wanted to sell. This man was Jolny, the vice principal of Bayer Academy. Beneath thick dark clouds, the wheat field seemed to churn, while the heavy shadowed sky hovered low above it. Behind the wheat field, several roads could be seen, none of them connected to one another. Of course, as for what lay beyond the frame, Urian had no idea. Halfway through looking at the painting, a suspicious aura suddenly rose from Jolny. What was going on? Why was he suddenly suspicious of Urian? Had Urian said something wrong? Impossible. Judging from Miss Aaron and the vice principal's reactions, this painting was definitely authentic. Then what exactly was Jolny suspicious of? Jolny slowly spoke. Duke Urian, do you truly understand the value of this painting? To be honest, I would rather make this transaction with someone who genuinely understands art. The moment Urian heard that, he felt something was wrong. It seemed he wouldn't be able to sell it for a high price. Fine, he would try saying something. Urian said calmly, Crucius passed away not long after completing this painting. Precisely because it is tied to the painter's death, this piece carries even more legendary value, does it not? Jolny smiled faintly. Correct. Crucius died in the very place shown in the background of this painting. I didn't expect your artistic knowledge to be so profound. Forgive my rudeness. Then, let us discuss the price. How does this number sound? Jolny raised 4 fingers. Urian thought the old man was being way too stingy. Only 40,000? So he said, this is a masterpiece whose value doubled after the painter's death. I thought you recognized its worth. Jolny paused, clearly not expecting the man before him to make such an outrageous demand. Then, I'll add another 100,000. Wait. Add another 100,000. So that hadn't been 40,000 just now, but 400,000? Since Na was roughly equal to dollars, that meant this was around 500 million won. This painting was actually worth 500 million won. Jolny called out to Urian, whose mind had almost been swallowed by money. Duke Urian, what do you think of the price? Urian snapped back to his senses and put on his signature fake smile. Very well, deal. At sunset, Aaron entered Jolny's office. Jolny had called Aaron over, mainly for 2 reasons. First, to thank her for introducing him to Urian. Second, to discuss the demons that had appeared at the academy. Those demons were likely the work of the Dawn Society. Aaron looked confused. Why would the Dawn Society do something like that? Jolny replied, their motive is unknown, but the evidence is solid. It seems they acted while the Academy's resonance stones were weakened. Of course, you don't need to worry too much. We've already strengthened the guards, and we'll do everything we can to protect the students. Aaron nodded. Right. And there's Duke Urian too. I was actually planning to thank him. Jolny replied, Duke Urian? After receiving the money, he left in a hurry. He said he was going to buy something called moonstones. Hearing that, Aaron instantly spat out her tea. What did you say? He's buying moonstones? Please excuse me. With that, Aaron turned and left. Jolny had no idea what was going on, and muttered, why is everyone so busy today? A short while later, Aaron arrived at the jewelry store and asked whether they still had any moonstones. The clerk bowed apologetically. I'm terribly sorry. Lord Urian purchased far more than expected, so we have no stock left. Aaron quickly asked, then when will the next batch arrive? The clerk replied, I'm afraid it will take quite a long time. Aaron fell into despair and collapsed onto the floor. How could this happen? I needed those gems for my thesis. Damn you, Urian. Meanwhile, Urian had already arrived at the most famous blacksmith shop in the Empire. The blacksmith of Netherforge stared at the moonstones in his hand. Then he asked in disbelief, are you telling me you want me to make a sword out of these gems? Urian nodded calmly. That's right. Can these gems be forged into a sword that carries flowing moonlight? Hearing that, the blacksmith roared in anger. That's not a sword. That's a luxury ornament. My pride won't allow me to make something like that. Urian tried to explain that it was meant to be used as a weapon, but the blacksmith was no longer listening. In his eyes, Urian was just a spoiled noble wasting gemstones for fun. No. If you want to play with luxury goods, go somewhere else. Netherforge only makes real weapons for knights. Weapons like the divine blade carried by Sir Lacy. Urian slowly explained, you misunderstand. I want to engrave a mana vessel into the blade, Arugerland. The blacksmith still argued back. Even then, it won't work. A gemstone sword is weaker than ordinary metal. How is it supposed to survive combat? The apprentice beside the blacksmith quickly tried to smooth things over. Lord Urian, we forge weapons under the name of this shop. Every sword we make is engraved with our mark. If the blade breaks easily, our shop's reputation will be ruined. Hearing that, Urian thought it over. That actually made sense. After all, this was the place that had forged Hayden's own sword. Then all he had to do was make sure it wouldn't break. The blacksmith pointed at Urian and snapped. Bullshit, do you think that's possible? Urian's expression darkened. Why wouldn't it be? If you don't believe me, then test it. Don't forget, I am the arrogant Urian. Double the fee and start forging. If it breaks during the test, the money and the gems are all yours. Seeing the confidence on Urian's face, and knowing the deal wouldn't be a loss for him either way, the blacksmith finally agreed. A few days later, the blacksmith successfully completed the moonstone sword. Urian took the blade and examined it carefully. Then he activated perfect swordsmanship. In an instant, the sword radiated dazzling light. Perfectly made. Now then, let the test begin. A short while later, a large crowd had already gathered outside the blacksmith shop. Whether they had come to watch Urian embarrass himself or witness his strength, no one could say. But it didn't matter. What happened today would be recorded in history. The moment they saw that deep blue mana, everyone couldn't help gasping in awe. Is that the rumored moonlight sword? As for Urian himself, even he was surprised. This feeling was completely different from before. It was like a clear, open path had appeared within the sword. Then, he seized the overflowing mana and fixed it onto the blade, forcing it to revolve continuously. This was the true, complete moonlight sword. With one slash, the armor the blacksmith was so proud of shattered into pieces. Urian asked calmly, so does this count as passing the test? The blacksmith coughed lightly. It seems I underestimated you. Urian smiled calmly, wearing that same signature fake smile. Heh. Sometimes, actions speak louder than words. After dropping that ridiculously arrogant line, he waved his hand and turned to leave. After Urian left, Sword Saint Lacy picked up a fragment of the armor. He didn't hold back his praise. As expected of Urian, I can't sense any trace of his mana on the armor. Still terrifying. That is the sword of a man who pursues pure slashing power. Then, Lacy looked at Linny. Right, you recently carried out a mission with Urian, didn't you? Linny lowered her head and quietly answered with 3 words. He is strong. Lacy asked again, did you notice any unusual aura from him? Linny looked confused. Teacher, what do you mean? What kind of unusual aura? Lacy touched his chin. For example, whether he felt like someone from the Dawn Society. At dusk, Urian walked down the road back to his estate, his heart filled with excitement. But once he came back to his senses, he suddenly remembered that he wasn't the real Urian. Just now, he had almost blended into this identity again. No, he couldn't forget who he was. He was someone who needed to return to Blue Star. And if he wanted to go back, there was only one way. He had to make this world reach the game's ending, where Hayden stopped the demon god's resurrection instead of dying at Urian's hands. Where was the plot now again? It seemed to be right around the Dawn Society's entrance. The cult that would do anything to resurrect the demon god Baal. They were also the sworn enemies of Hayden and Linny, especially Linny Londabelle. Her father had been killed by the Dawn Society. Just as Urian thought of that, a sharp killing intent suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Without hesitation, he placed his hand on the sword at his waist and cautiously scanned his surroundings. "Ha, I don't know who you are, but I've already detected your mana. Come out." Once their presence was exposed, two figures silently stepped forward. The one who appeared was Eleonora Demisi, a bishop of the Dawn Society, and a mage skilled in extreme dark magic. Urian spoke calmly. "Long time no see, Eleonora. And this gentleman as well." Eleonora removed her cloak. She smiled faintly. "You recognized me even when I was covered up this much." As expected of Urian, Urian forced himself to stay calm and smiled. "I can more or less guess why you came here." Hearing that, Eleonora lightly clapped her hands. "Wonderful. Then I hope you'll give us an answer soon." The moment she said that, Urian was confused. Why wasn't this following the plot? He had only been bluffing just now, so he kept smiling. "Haha, there's no rush. After all, this is something I still want to consider carefully." Eleonora said she wasn't in a hurry. "After all, you were the one who contacted the Dawn Society first and made the proposal, weren't you? You said you wanted to join us." Join the Dawn Society. That simple phrase instantly made Urian's expression turn ugly. Damn it, original owner. Had you already taken things this far? Why did he always have to clean up your mess? Urian forced himself to stay steady. As I recall, there was no time limit on joining, was there? Eleonora's eyes narrowed slightly. That is true. But what if you're using your request to join as bait to capture the Dawn Society? Joining us could be a trap in itself. After all, you are the Imperial family's dog, Urian of the Closed Eyes. Hearing that, Urian knew things were bad. He was being suspected. But if the Imperial family discovered that he had tried to join the Dawn Society, he would be finished all the same. This could easily spiral into the worst possible outcome. The worst case wasn't him killing Hayden. It was Hayden killing him. If that happened, he would never be able to escape the game. Urian spoke calmly. "So you were suspecting that?" "I didn't realize," Eleonora replied coldly, "because you know too much. If you plan to leave now, we won't just stand by and watch." With that, the huge man behind Eleonora slowly stepped forward. Looking closer, Urian realized the man before him was a Monsieur, a member of the Dawn Society's combat group, stronger than ordinary knights. The man removed his cloak and roared, "Urian, I, Pelkor, will kill you today. The wound you left me still aches, even now." Faced with that dramatic introduction, Urian didn't show any panic. He still wore that hypocritical smile. "So we know each other. Sorry, I don't really remember." Pelkor instantly flew into a rage and vanished from Urian's sight with a blink step. When he appeared again, he was already behind Urian, throwing a punch. Driven by his born swordsman trait, Urian instantly drew the sword at his waist and blocked Pelkor's attack. But the moment the blade came out, Urian regretted it. Damn it. His body had instinctively drawn the old iron sword. The subconscious was terrifying. Either way, he had to hold out for as long as he could. The two immediately clashed in a fierce battle. But before long, the iron sword in Urian's hand could no longer endure. It was smashed apart by a single punch. The powerful impact sent Urian flying dozens of meters until he finally crashed into a wall and stopped. Pelkor burst into laughter. "Ha ha ha. How does it feel to get knocked down by a small fry, Urian?" Urian said nothing. At that moment, the anger in his heart had swelled to its limit, and waves of crimson light began radiating from his body. Damn it. Why did he have to suffer like this? He was sick of taking the blame for things he had never done. The instant his emotions reached their peak, his innate trait, burning eyes, manifested. Then Urian slowly drew the moonstone sword at his waist. The crimson aura was bone-chilling, but Pelkor didn't panic at all. "Another sword? Then I'll smash that one too." But in the next second, Urian had already slashed. Countless cuts appeared across Pelkor's arm on the spot. In the blink of an eye, Pelkor was left in shock. But he still refused to believe it. He threw another punch. Urian suddenly twisted his wrist. Then he slashed upward. Pelkor had no time to react. Blood and murderous aura erupted from his body at the same time. His face was filled with terror. So this was Urian's power? He was nothing short of a monster. Unlike Pelkor, Urian could barely suppress the smile, tugging at the corners of his mouth. The feeling of cutting someone down, and seeing that look of terror on their face. What was this sensation? It felt good. Way too good. Ding. Trait activated. Open eyes. Usable only by those with the fox-eyed trait. Triggered under extreme emotional excitement. Physical ability increases. Both eyes can perceive more than usual, and the user becomes extremely aggressive. The instant the system voice ended, Urian thrust his sword forward. The blade pierced straight through Pelkor's chest, dead center. Urian laughed softly. Heh, the title steel arm sounds almost pathetic on you now. As soon as he finished speaking, he grabbed Pelkor's head tightly, ready to cut it off. But in the next second, Urian felt something cold against his neck. A cold voice followed. How about we stop here? Being stopped like that finally brought a shred of awareness back to Urian. He slowly shook his head. When he clearly saw the scene before him, his body began trembling uncontrollably. He had done this? What had he just done? Fox-eyed characters opening their eyes and awakening was common enough. But this trait had dragged out Urian's brutality along with it. Urian forced himself to stay composed and said coldly, "Don't blame me for this trait. You started it." Eleanor replied, "Pelkor was far too rude. That much is true. But after watching that battle, my opinion of you has risen even higher. Stop wasting time with meaningless tests and join hands with us." Ding. Trait activated. Built-in personality. Makes the user more likely to be loved by the opposite sex. Urian wasn't affected. He simply turned his head and stared at her blankly. Joining hands is possible, but let me think about it a little longer. With that, he turned and left. All that remained were the terrified Pelkor and a gloomy Eleonora. Eleonora cursed inwardly. Just like back at the Imperial Palace, her trait had no effect on him. So, Pelkor, compared to when he blinded you back then, has anything changed? Pelkor was still trapped in fear. After a long pause, he finally answered, "Not much has changed, but he seems even more brutal now." A short while later, Urian returned to his estate and collapsed onto the floor. He really had survived, thanks to the burning eyes trait. But he couldn't rely completely on this incomplete trait. He had expected it. But the Dawn Society was seriously difficult to deal with. What should he do now? If he sided with the Dawn Society, Hayden would kill him, and he would never return to his original world. But if he reported them directly, the Dawn Society members hiding inside the Imperial Palace would probably get rid of him first. So he had no choice but to join the Dawn Society for now, gather as much information as possible, and use his own hands to reach the ending where the demon god's resurrection was stopped. That was the only route back to his original world. Sometime later, Urian quietly arrived at Golden Plum Monastery. Everyone around him stared in disbelief, their faces filled with fear. Urian paid no attention to their biased gazes and continued wearing his signature smile. At that moment, a nun quickly approached. "Lord Urian, I will guide you. Please follow me." After they walked for a while, the nun removed her disguise. That's right. She was Eleonora. Seeing her drop the disguise right in front of him, Urian was a little surprised. He spoke calmly. "Long time no see, Miss Eleonora. You people really are bold, hiding the Dawn Society's headquarters inside such a large monastery." Eleonora didn't respond. She only spoke in a low voice. "Bishop Bark is waiting. Lord Urian, please mind your manners." When the door opened, what came into view was a young man seated on a throne, surrounded by a group of believers. Speaking of which, this cult leader didn't seem to give off much authority at all. As expected of an ordinary farmer chosen by a sacred relic, the leader of the Dawn Society, Tainalon. After Eleonora knelt, she quietly reminded him, "Urian, before Bishop Bark, please kneel." Urian looked down at Eleonora with disdain and asked the real question. "Why should I?" Eleonora froze. "Didn't you say you wanted to stand with us?" Urian smiled calmly. "Haha, I didn't come here to rely on some insignificant faith. I came to seek a partnership." The moment he said that, the crowd began whispering among themselves. Urian continued, "I know all of you are after my authority, and I simply need the power of the god you serve." Tainalon raised a hand and silenced the noisy believers below. "Quiet. If he is here for a partnership, then there is no need to treat him that way. Lord Urian and Eleonora will remain. Everyone else, leave." None of the believers dared to disobey. After bowing respectfully, they all left the hall. Once the believers were gone, Tainalon laughed and patted Urian on the shoulder and didn't hold back his praise, as expected of Urian. After that, he told Urian to follow him somewhere. On the way, Tainalon explained that the thing inside was something no one except bishops could approach. As for why they couldn't approach it, that was naturally because of the sacred relic. And the reason he was showing all of this to Urian was simple. He didn't want Urian to leave. After all, creating an enemy like Urian would be extremely troublesome. That was why he intended to grant Urian the position of bishop. That caught Urian off guard. He hadn't expected Tainalon to say something like that. A short while later, they arrived at the deepest part of the corridor. A foul stench instantly flooded his nose. Urian looked closely and saw a golden cup standing above a pool of blood. Just looking at it filled him with an inexplicable sense of unease. If his guess was right, this was the sacred relic, the demon god's chalice. It could materialize the lingering thoughts of the demon god Barbados. In the next moment, Tainalon raised his left hand and began praying. The demon god's chalice quickly responded, condensing a mass of black matter from within. That's right, it was a demon's foot. Seeing the creation process for the first time truly shocked Urian, but he knew exactly what that sacred relic really was, and he also knew what kind of effect that foot would bring. Urian forced down his disgust and smiled faintly. How fascinating. A demon's foot, huh? I really did come to the right place. That foot would undoubtedly become a cornerstone for carrying out his plan. Seeing Urian show such interest in the demon's foot, Tainalon actually handed it over to him directly. The fact that he gave it away so easily made Urian unable to guess what Tainalon was thinking. Tainalon explained, to create a foot like this, many demons must be sacrificed. It takes a great deal of effort, but it grants the user a corresponding power. If used properly, it might even be enough to defeat the Sword Saint. Urian naturally knew exactly what kind of power this foot could grant. After all, this was how humanoid demons were born. Rather than gaining demonic power, it was more accurate to say the user would become a demon. Just imagining it made him sick. So the real question was, how was he supposed to refuse this foot? Just as Urian was thinking that, Eleonora finally spoke. Bishop Bark, isn't it a little too early to give him the demon's foot? He hasn't even formally confirmed his membership yet. The demon's foot is one of the foundations of our organization. If we hand it out this easily, it may cause chaos within our ranks. Seeing the situation, Urian quickly tried to smooth things over. He agreed that Eleonora had a point, and naturally handed the demon's foot back to Tainalon. Tainalon accepted the demon's foot and spoke calmly. Lord Urian, you are very considerate, but consideration alone will not be enough to convince Eleonora. As you know, the broken stone needed to create a demon's foot can only be obtained from demons of the three-horned level or higher. Go and obtain a demon heart. If it's you, it should be easy. Hearing that, Urian was taken aback. Even for him, going after a three-horned demon without an imperial order would obviously draw attention. Tainalon simply waved his hand. You don't need to worry about that. We'll arrange everything on our end. 3 days later, Urian set off on a journey to a foreign land. Sitting on the train, he felt deeply troubled. Everything had happened far too suddenly. Not only had Tainalon acknowledged him as a member of the cult, but he had also granted him the title of bishop. And the most surprising part was that right after he joined the Dawn Society, the mission to hunt a three-horned demon was issued through the Imperial Secretariat. As expected, the Imperial Secretariat also had Dawn Society agents inside it. The scale and operational ability of this organization were too great to call it a mere secret society. It was almost like another nation. What a pain. Urian looked up and saw Herland introducing the city and the transportation to him. Of course, don't misunderstand. Herland was not going to hunt the three-horned demon. He was representing the Clicart family and heading to Benedin to attend the Ascension Festival of the Sun God Church. It should have been something to look forward to, but the person sitting across from him was Urian, so Herland naturally felt uncomfortable all over. Sometime later, the train arrived in Benedin City. After getting off, the two prepared to go their separate ways. Before leaving, Herland still couldn't help giving him a reminder. Urian, don't provoke Border Count Aroniel. They were closely connected to the Highlands family you destroyed before, so he definitely won't look kindly on you. The moment Urian heard that, his expression turned awful, and he cursed inwardly. Damn it, original owner. Leaving me another mess again. Forget it. He was only here to subjugate a demon anyway. There probably wouldn't be any conflict. Unfortunately, imagination was beautiful, but reality was something else entirely. Oraniel said with a serious expression, postpone the schedule. Pyron Forest is currently preparing for the Ascension Festival. Aside from members of the Sun God Church, all outsiders are forbidden from entering. Hearing that, Urian still tried to persuade him. There was a demon in the forest, and the Ascension Festival could easily turn into a disaster. But some people just wouldn't listen. Aroniel remained cold. That still won't do. Besides, It hasn't made any moves yet, has it? And the Ascension Festival is one of the most important Oppo celebrations. We cannot ruin the entire festival just to slay a demon that has yet to act. Urian had no choice but to curse silently. It seemed he wouldn't be able to finish the demon quickly and go home that easily. Just then, a clear little girl's voice suddenly sounded. Urian instinctively turned to look. A finely dressed little girl pushed open the door and quietly walked in. The moment she entered the room, she began sizing Urian up, making him feel a little uncomfortable. Oranil completely panicked and immediately shouted for the little girl to stay away from Urian. Urian was speechless and could only let out a bitter smile. Even he wouldn't go so far as to bully a child, right? When he looked at Oranil again, the man was already completely enveloped in the aura of fear. Seeing that, Urian had no intention of staying any longer. He turned to leave. Border Count Oranil, we'll talk again later. After stepping outside, Urian stood there and thought for a moment. It seemed this festival would soon turn into hell on earth. Since ancient times, the more horns a demon had, the stronger it became. And, starting from 3 horned demons, they also gained unique abilities and were named based on those abilities. One of them was the Dream Tree, Hamelin. Hamelin was an erosion-type demon that could turn the area where it took root into its own fortress. A maze where entrances and exits constantly shifted, and poisonous swamps that infected anyone who touched them. Even if someone managed to escape the fortress by luck, Hamelin's mental attacks would break them down. Only a handful of people could truly clear it. Hamelin would probably finish building its maze very soon. Judging by the timing, Lord Oranil would come looking for him again before long. Just as Urian thought that, a subordinate hurriedly pushed open the door and informed him that Lord Oranil was calling for him. Urian paused slightly. That was faster than expected. Then it was time to go. A short while later, inside the Count's residence, Oranil spoke with a grave expression. Lord Urian, my daughter, Trina, hasn't woken up since last night. The attending doctor can't find the cause either. And it isn't just Trina. Several children in the city have also fallen unconscious. You know something, don't you? Something this strange must be the work of a demon. Urian didn't deny it. He simply nodded in silence. That's right. It's most likely the work of the Dream Tree Hamelin in Piran Forest. It plants seeds inside living beings and turns them into its minions. It doesn't affect adults much, but for children, it's fatal. Before they turn into minions, they lose consciousness first. Your daughter may already be running out of time. The moment he heard that, Oranil shot to his feet. He grabbed Urian's shoulders tightly with both hands. How is that possible? Hunt it down immediately. Forget the Ascension Festival. Save my daughter first. I'll do anything. Urian looked at Oranil coldly. Will you really do anything? Even if it causes damage to Benedin. Hearing that, Oranil's body stiffened, and a terrible feeling rose in his heart. But to save his daughter, he had no other choice. I accept. Whatever the losses are, I can bear them. Urian turned away and revealed a wicked smile. Good, then I'll begin. The hunt for the Dream Tree Hamelin begins. In truth, the method to defeat the Dream Tree was very simple. Spray gasoline throughout the forest. Then all it took was one tiny match. This was the most efficient clear method Urian, the veteran gamer, had figured out. In an instant, flames swept through the entire forest, and an agonized roar echoed from within. That was Hamelin. Hearing the roar, the knights immediately raised their weapons and entered combat stances, ready to fight at any moment. However, Urian stopped them with one hand. Please step back. That demon is mine to handle alone. The knights were stunned. Are you saying you intend to take down a 3-horned demon by yourself? Urian slowly drew the sword at his waist and spoke calmly. Yes. If all of you stay here, you'll only get in my way.